Hello everybody, while this video gets started, I wanted to tell you guys about the $500 in Battle.net credit that we're giving away to help spread the love on some new gaming Curios channels. We're making channels for Fortnite and VR to give you guys the very best moments those games have to offer. And to enter the giveaway, all you gotta do is click that link down below and subscribe to those new channels. You could win $500 in Battle.net credit, and it's super easy and fast. Anyway, enjoy the video. Hello everybody, Disciple here with Overwatch Curios. Now, one of the most important components of any first-person shooter is the weapons that the players get to use. For Overwatch, the weapons for every hero are as diverse and powerful as the heroes themselves are in this game world. It's important for designers to put just as much emphasis on the weapons and how they play in the world as it is to flesh out the story and feeling of any given character. So much like the heroes, the weapons they use in combat often go through a ton of different changes and iterations before the design team is satisfied with the end result of a character. Because when you're playing them, the weapon is the only thing that you see, and it's really your only interaction into the game world as far as it goes in the FPS. Now, we've discussed at length the changes that heroes have gone through during development and even heroes that have been cancelled. So for this video, we thought it'd be cool to look at some of Overwatch's cancelled weapons and discuss from concept to gameplay how exactly they could have changed some of our favorite heroes had they been added to the game. Now, Bastion is a character that thematically saw a wide array of changes in the early stages of his development cycle. Early concepts varied drastically, and the team sought to find a weapon that seemed suitable for the character outside of his turret mode, which is something the team had been working towards since the original concepts. Now, you guys might have heard how Bastion is famous for having dozens and maybe even hundreds of potential ultimates, but they also went through a few ideas for his weapon. Several weapons were presented in concept, ranging from a complete lack of a recon weapon to a large blaster pistol which would allow Bastion to fight outside of his turret mode. However, the most interesting of these has to be an early version of Bastion with a flamethrower. Flamethrowers as a whole are extremely powerful weapons capable of putting out large area damage at a short range, so it's kind of crazy to think of Recon Bastion having one today. The ability to shift from a long-range turret of melting into a short-range mobile turret of melting is pretty terrifying. Early concepts showed him with a pilot light underneath the barrel of his gun, which led to a large ammunition drum, so maybe instead of an actual flamethrower, he physically set his bullets on fire while in recon form. Whichever it may have been, it's probably a good thing today that we don't have to worry about a flame-wielding Bastion terrorizing people on the move and spy checking his own team. However, it wasn't just Bastion's recon mode that saw changes from the early days of original design. Some initial concepts of Bastion portray his sentry mode not as a minigun, but instead as a single-fire cannon tank mode, which bears pretty heavy resemblance to some StarCraft tanks. And this all makes sense now because we know originally Bastion went through several ultimate abilities before the developers finally added in the tank mode that he has today. He started with the barrage of bouncing grenades, then transitioned to a remotely deployed mine that would deal huge damage, all before ending up with the cannon today, and there were a few other fun ones like being able to fly around and shoot through walls. So it seems pretty likely that the earliest form of Bastion's sentry mode, the cannon, was instead transitioned to his ultimate, and instead he was given the chain gun that he wields today. Now, from one tank to another, we get to take a look at Reinhardt, one of the earliest designed characters in all of Overwatch. And for the development team, it was clear from the start that they wanted him to physically carry a protective shield on the battlefront as he waded through enemies and carved a protective zone for his allies. However, in some of his early forms, Reinhardt's shield was a physical piece of armor, and instead of his trusty two-handed hammer that he has today, he instead wielded a flail. Now, the flail would probably function just as Reinhardt's hammer does today, with him swinging it in wide arcs to deal area damage. However, one of the most curious things here is how a physical shield would have functioned when not raised. If Reinhardt's shield was always in the game world, even when not raised, how exactly would enemies deal with it, and how would bullets interact with it? Would the shield break from damage only to reappear seconds later, or is it possible that at one point in time his shield was simply smaller but had an unlimited health pool? Maybe it could even be a spot that he takes reduced damage from so he could try and position himself against enemies to stay in the fight longer. Given all of the early concept art that we've been able to look at, it's clear that Blizzard really wanted to bring the flail to life in Overwatch, which would have fit perfectly in with the Crusader theme of Reinhardt. However, logistically, it was just too hard to plan out the functionality of his shield with these early models, so instead the team would end up with the two-handed hammer and the generated shield that Reinhardt rushes into battle with today. Many of Overwatch's heroes are influenced by fantasy archetypes and characters, and much like Reinhardt, Mercy is one of those. Blizzard felt that the staff was a core concept of Mercy's visual design and appeal. However, they originally looked for ways to combine her blaster pistol with the staff into one singular weapon. The pistol was a secondary addition as a means of allowing Mercy to fight back when she really needed to, so original prototypes for the weapon featured the barrel of the pistol located inside of her staff. Still yet, other original concepts for the pistol included a weapon that would physically extend or collapse from staff mode to pistol mode, and vice versa, as a means of conveying how important her weapon was to her. However, the actual design and implementation of this blaster staff became troublesome and bulky for the team, and instead Mercy would become the first hero in the game to be designed around using multiple weapons with the same hero. And it kind of makes sense since she's a medic who focuses on her staff, but she can whip out her trusty pistol when things get hairy. Now, when it comes to multiple weapons, we'd be remiss not to talk about Overwatch's favorite, and well, only climatologist, Mei. In original concepts, Mei was much more badass and less approachable than the Mei we know today. Originally depicted as a much more intimidating character, Mei went through several iterations of weapons before ending up with her endothermic blaster. Some of these included a two-handed cannon, which ultimately looked too much like Zarya's particle cannon to make it into development, and even a more traditional rifle. However, the concept that won the designers over and almost ended up in the game featured Mei with a one-handed cryogenic weapon and an ice pick. While maybe far-fetched at this point, it's really cool to think of Mei having the option to deal tremendous damage in melee range after freezing her enemies with an ice pick, or potentially even having the ability to use said ice pick to climb walls, maybe at a slower rate than Genji or Hanzo. The concept of an extremely mobile Mei who could suddenly climb walls and flank enemies extremely effectively only to axe them down seconds later with that pickaxe is pretty terrifying, although kind of fun to think about. However, in the end, designers decided that with the heavy focus on intimidating characters in the game already, it was important to create a much more tame and approachable hero with a lighter tone than some of the others in the dark story of the Overwatch world. And they were still able to give Mei quite a bit of single target burst with her right-click icicle, and a good amount of mobility as well with her ice wall. Now, if you want to look at some of the most drastic differences in weapon design for any character, you'd have to take a look at Genji. Originally codenamed the Assassin, it's no secret that Genji and Hanzo were originally conceived as the same hero. However, in early concepts, there was an absolute wealth of weapon options explored for the assassin trope of the game, also called the Omniblade. While some of these are fairly tame, such as Genji wielding a sniper rifle, there were definitely some oddball concepts thrown around by the development team. Two of these in particular feature Genji wielding a saw blade and another in which he wields a whip. Now, the saw blade conceptually could have functioned as a boomerang, which would be a really interesting mechanic to see added to the game at a later date. A weapon that, once fired, travels in a line, dealing damage to everyone it hits, only to return and deal damage again on that return fire, is pretty sweet to think about. However, this character would need to have an option for dealing damage during this downtime, so the Sawblade Genji happens to have Wolverine-like claws on his opposite hand, maybe so he could dive into the fight and follow up. This form of Genji would probably have thrown weapons from afar while clawing people in melee range as he waited for the return of the Sawblade to finish them off. Meanwhile, the whip model of Genji embraces the original goal of Genji. Blizzard wanted to develop a melee-only character. This design of Genji sees him with the whip deployed from one arm, while his other arm is embedded with a three-pronged sword. It's easy to see this character whipping, slowing, or even stunning enemies with his whip at short range, while allowing him to close the gap with the blades protruding from his arms. However, as design and testing progressed, Blizzard came to the conclusion that a melee-only character didn't exactly fit in the world of Overwatch unless it was a tank. There's a fine line of balance when trying to make a melee character, and you basically have to make them insanely OP or they're unplayable. Now, unfortunately, it's unlikely that we'll ever see a character completely focused on melee combat because of this difficult point of balance, but it's still awesome to have the opportunity to look back at the concepts and progress of the Shimada Ninja himself, and how Blizzard decided to incorporate melee combat into his kit. Doomfist is another great example of how a melee combat character can work, but of course he still needs ways to close the gaps and deal some damage from a range. Now, the art of character balance and design is tricky. Developers are often tasked with compromising their original versions for the sake of striking a balance in gameplay and design. On top of that, decisions have to be made in the aesthetic of heroes in the game and how the team wants certain heroes to be portrayed in the world in accordance with their personal story, as well as the overarching story of the world of Overwatch itself. And while not every design will make it to completion, it's great to have the opportunity to look back at different forms and the development cycle of heroes and their weapons in general. Now, if you guys are new around here, do yourself a favor and subscribe to our channel so you can keep up to date with all of our newest content. And I'd like to thank you guys so much for watching this video. Until next time, peace.